Hi, I'd like to show you how to make your keys more realistic by taking advantage of a cool new plugin that allows for light wrapping. Now, light wrapping is the thing that makes your footage just look more like a real-world event and less like a bad composite. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. First up, I've got a piece of footage here that started its life as a green screen file. Now, I'll just adjust that there for the pixel aspect ratio, and you see that this is clearly shot on a green background. However, what I want to do is start to composite that over some different backdrops and make it look more believable. If we take a look at the effect controls, you'll see that I've already applied the Light Wrap Fantastic, the new plugin we're looking at today from Digital Anarchy. If I turn that on and off, you see it's making a subtle difference in the footage. Well, let's turn this off to begin with, and we'll reapply it new, and I'll walk you through what the plugin does. Over here in my effects and presets, I'll grab the Light Wrap Fantastic and simply drag it onto the layer. Now, initially, nothing appears to happen until you give it a little bit of feedback. First up, you need to tell it which layer is actually the background layer. So right now we're using this rooftop background as a shot that is appearing behind our subject. So I'll select that. Under Render, let's switch this to just view the wrap, and we'll turn the two layers off down below. This makes it really easy to see what's happening with the light wrap, and you'll notice that it's starting to pick up the colors of the background and wrap them around our subject. Now, it's softened this a nice deal so that we're not getting details just overlapped. Rather, we're picking up the colors and the intensity of those colors. Now, you could adjust the size here, and you see that it'll put more or less wrapping around the edge. This helps you depending upon how bright that background is. Additionally, we can blur this a little bit more, and I'll increase this so you can see the change. And all that's doing is applying a subtle pre-blur to the background, and you see that that just mixes the colors a little bit more together. Now, that's working quite nicely, and let's take a look at that as a composite, and we'll turn the background layer back on. You'll notice if we toggle that on and off, that's doing a very nice job of picking up the colors of the background and making the subject look like the light is wrapping around their head and their shoulders. Now, this works quite nicely, and to refine it, you have the ability to change the blend mode. Right now, soft light is very gentle, but we're in an outdoor situation, so I might choose to use the Add Blend mode, which is going to brighten things up a little bit. You'll notice here that that's a pretty intense wrap, so I'll adjust the brightness down, but that works quite nicely. Now our subject actually looks a little bit more exposed and that the light is shining on their face. Now this works really well, and you could of course continue to play with all of the major blend modes that you need here to change how that wrapping is occurring. And you have subtle ones such as color or the ability to darken the scene, but in this case let's stick with Add. I like that. Now, additionally, we have the ability to use a mask to limit this effect. So, for example, let's show the mask and choose to use a particular layer. In this case, I'll set the layer to be my footage layer, layer 1. And you see that it's currently using the alpha channel or the entire layer to apply it. Well, we can switch this to luminance, which is going to drive the effect. And what I'm going to do in this case is use luminance, but turn the mask off. Now, that's looking pretty subtle, and let's adjust the brightness there. And you'll see that that's controlling where the effect is appearing. We also have the ability to invert this here. And now, if you take a look at it, it's affecting the face a lot more and less affecting other areas. This just gives us a little more control, and we can play with that. Remember, as you look at the mask, you can control where the keying and the light wrap is going to occur, and this can be quite effective as you want to wrap that around your subject and really control it. In this case, just more in the face region and less in the body. All right, that looks pretty good, but what happens when we switch the background? Well, if I go to this red backdrop, we're in a different type of an environment. And now we'll just switch the background to be that same wall layer. You'll notice that it starts to pick up areas from the wall itself. Now, I find it useful to play with the modes here. And since this is a darker scene, I'm going to switch this to multiply. And you see what that starts to do. Let's toggle that off and on. And you see it picks up the subtle red of the background and just introduces a hint of that into our subject. We can turn this off for right now. And you'll see that if we take a look at the overall effect, the light wrap is not as intense here in this more subtle situation, but it definitely can be used to fine-tune what's happening. Now, as you adjust this, you might notice temporarily that the quality drops. Remember, if we're taking a look at full quality, we also have the ability to turn off adaptive resolution on our previews. This will slow down these sliders a little bit and wait for it to catch up, and then the screen will redraw. You'll notice I'm also viewing at full quality, and not a bad idea to set your screen to 50% or 100% to more accurately judge the effect of the overall plugin. And that's working pretty well there. You see that the red of the backdrop is shining onto the brighter areas of his head and shoulder. All right, I like how that one's working, but let's take a look at another related example. In this case, we've got our individual footage, and let's remove the mask for a second here. This is pretty straightforward. We've got our subject, and what we've already done is apply the light wrap effect, but let's clear that out and apply it again right from the Effects and Presets folder under Digital Anarchy. I'll drop that on, and I now need to just assign the layer. So let's start by using this background plate. You'll notice that it does a nice job of picking up the colors of the background and starts to put them onto our subject. I particularly like how it's starting to mix with the shiny areas of the leather coat. Let's adjust the size a little bit. And again, I'll switch off adaptive resolution so I get a little more realistic feedback. And that's working quite nice. But this is a pretty simple environment. What happens if we go to something a little more elaborate, such as this outdoor scene? Well, let's switch the layer that's in use, and you'll notice that it instantly matches the color to the background scene. And I really like how this is pulling it together. Make this a little bit stronger. We can try different blend modes, such as overlay. And you notice that it just interacts a bit differently with our subject. On and off, and it's quite effective how it pulls that all together. Now, I'm a big fan of using modes like overlay and multiply to get a nice darkening effect when I have a darker scene. And earlier, we used the layer as a mask, but you've got two other options here as well. For example, if I'd like, I could choose to use a path. Now, with the pen tool selected, I can just choose my subject. And in this case, I'm going to loosely go around the head region, so we create an area to ignore. You could, of course, get a little more finessed and move that mask and track it, but for now, this is working. Of course, I don't want to actually mask that layer, so let's tell that to simply be set to the none mode, and we'll apply a slight feather so there's a gentle transition between selected and not selected. If we take a look over here, you'll see that you can view that mask, and I'll say use the path. All I need to then do is under the path selection, choose mask 1, which is the one I created here. You'll also notice that it has its own feather controls here, so you can create a nice gradual blend, which is very effective. Now, let's turn off Show Mask, and you'll notice in this case that it's applying the mapping of the light wrap only to the area inside the mask. Well, that's fine, but in this case, I actually just want to invert that. And what I'm going to do is come down here and click Invert, and you'll notice now if we toggle that effect on and off, that the face and the hair are being more left alone, but the light wrap is occurring to the jacket, which is a shiny area. Now, for believability, what I would likely do here is apply 2 instances. All right, I like how that's going. Select the effect, and we're simply going to duplicate that so there's 2 instances of the effect. You see there's number 2. Now, let's scroll down and uncheck the invert box, and you'll see that the light wrap goes back to the face region. So the first instance of the effect is affecting the clothes, and the second is the face. This gives us greater control, so we can switch the blend mode and perhaps set a slightly different brightness setting or overall size so that we get different amounts of light wrap in different areas of the photo. Toggling that on and off, I like how that's affecting the face, and there's the jacket change, and I've got separate controls for each. By using the same mask between the two layers, it creates a very smooth transition and avoids any duplication of the light wrap effect. All right, that works well, but let's talk about one more example. If I switch over here to this more sports-oriented one, even though we're not using a photorealistic background, the light wrap can come in handy. Let's toss the light wrap Fantastic onto that layer and simply target the background layer. There it is. And in this case, I'll turn the layer off for a second and switch this to wrap so I can really view what's happening. Remember, this gives you control over the effect. And so I'm going to get a very nice, thick blur going around the edges there. I like that light wrap. Let's turn off the adaptive resolution and bring up the brightness just a little bit. I like that. It's nice and intense. But in this case, it's just a little strong. Well, the third type of mask control we have is the ability to use a gradient. And let's turn that on for a second. Now it's very easy to have fall off. So if we look at that background there with the brighter soccer ball, this allows me to actually just click and position that gradient where I want it to be. If we drag that around, you'll notice that the gradient is reactive, which is pretty cool. This allows me to favor one side more than the other. And we can, of course, adjust the direction for a little bit of an angle and play with the size for more or less transition. So it starts as a solid black line, but you could, of course, spread that out for a nice fall off. Let's refine that position just a little bit. I like that. Uncheck the box there. And you'll notice now that it's favoring coming from the top edge with a bit of fall off. We have the ability to simply move this mask, and this makes it easy to tweak. Now, let's bring that up just a little bit. We'll switch from soft light to something stronger, like add. And you see there, as we move that gradient, it's going to update and affect what happens. There's that mask. Set it to that shoulder just a little bit. And let's turn off the mask. And it's favoring that top edge just a little bit more while doing essentially nothing down here to the lower left shoulder. All right, well, that's pretty cool. And as you see from all these different examples, we've got a lot of controls that really make this a powerful addition to your compositing toolbox. The overall benefit here of the light wrap is how fast and easy it is. One of my favorite things is the fact that it can actually use the GPU. Now, to check a little bit more about that, just click the About box, and you'll see that you can support both CUDA and OpenCL. So if you're using graphics cards from different manufacturers, CUDA typically being NVIDIA, and OpenCL being most every other manufacturer, this will give you the ability to support that inside the product for much faster rendering. That's a big addition when you're doing keying jobs and you're in a real big hurry and you want to get the job done. By supporting that, this is going to really speed up the processing of the effect. Combining that with advanced controls for things like multiple blending modes, the ability to use masks and gradients, and precise controls over which layer is actually wrapping means that you've got a very powerful tool to improve your overall keying experience. Make sure you check this out. This is called Light Wrap Fantastic. It's available from Digital Anarchy, and this should give you some new things. You'll find a downloadable trial and, of course, more resources over on digitalanarchy.com.